Whatever your reason for searching for telephoto lens, there is probably one thing we'll learn pretty quickly. The telephoto lenses, tend to be quite expensive, and to some degree that is okay, especially if you make money out of it. However, if you like myself are looking to try it as a hobby that is unlikely to pay, at least in the near future, then we need to get creative in our search for quality gear that will do the job and not break the bank. And that is how I came across this Tamron telephoto zoom. Hello and welcome to the channel. We review all kinds of tech gear on this channel, especially focusing on the budget tools that will still deliver quality results. So if this is your area of interest, do join us by subscribing. It is absolutely free. So in this video I'll talk about key specifications of this lens, I'll also talk about the price and of course share sample photo shots as well as video footage. I will use my full frame camera for it so we can see the full potential of this full frame lens. Okay, so why this Tamron? Well, first and foremost, the price and of course compatibility. So this Tamron telephoto can be found online for the price of between 100 to 200 British pounds or around $200 give or take, depending on the condition. I paid about 150 pounds for this lens a few months ago and I was quite happy with what I've got. I will leave links where I bought this lens in the description of this video. So, from compatibility perspective, this Tamron was available for 3 DSLR mounts, Canon EF, Nikon and Sony Alpha mount. I have here Canon EF version and I will be testing it on my Sony A7IV with the Smart KNF Concept autofocus adapter. I might make a video about this adapter in the future, so do let me know in the comments if you'll be interested in such a review. So, despite a very competitive price, this lens has a few cool design features on offer. This lens was released in 2010 and it incorporates Tamron's, at the time, new XLD optical design, which employs extra low dispersion lens elements made with highly specialized glass to deliver, and I quote Tamron marketing brochure, crisp, clear images with sharp contrast. In regards to build quality, the lens feels robust in hand. It is pretty much full plastic construction, however, it definitely doesn't feel cheap. We have 2 switches on this lens, one for vibration compensation, also known as optical stabilization, and the second to turn on and off autofocus. It is also worth mentioning that despite its quite bright aperture of f4 to 5.6, which of course requires bigger and heavier glass, it is comparatively light lens, weighing only 750 grams or 25 ounces if you are in US. We also get a minimum focusing distance of 1.5 meters, which is also quite practical. As a matter of fact, I often use this lens as a portrait lens with pretty good results on a full-frame camera. 1.5 meters of minimum focusing distance also allows us to do some macro photography. I do tend to stop down, even sometimes all the way to about f8 to squeeze maximum sharpness performance out of this lens and get as much subject in focus as possible. We get 9 aperture blades here, which produce a more or less smooth bokeh rings when the lens is stopped down, and we'll check samples of it shortly. And we get 62mm filter size, which is pretty much standard on this series of Tamron lenses. I'll put the rest of the specs on the screen, you're welcome to pause the video if you want to read them. We also have a handy focus distance indicator, which can be useful when focusing manually, especially in the video mode. The zoom ring is also very comfortable to operate, there is no fixator for the zoom, however I didn't have any issues with the zoom creep. And also this lens comes with the removable lens hood, which is quite handy. So this lens also incorporates USD, a so-called ultrasonic silent drive. I would argue that it's not exactly silent, especially compared to the more modern lenses. However, combined with my Sony A7IV face detect autofocus system, it delivers quite quick and precise focusing. Okay, possibly not at the level of high-end Canon L lenses, however, still fairly decent focusing speed, even good enough for bird photography, although capturing birds in flight with this lens will definitely require a good amount of practice. We also get Tamron's optical stabilization, a so-called VC, vibration compensation technology, which is very useful, especially on telephoto lenses. And note here, because Tamron relied on Sony Alpha mount in-camera stabilization, that didn't include optical stabe in the Sony version of this lens, so the OS is only available on Canon and Nikon mounts. I would advise to go for the version with the optical stabilization unless you specifically plan to use this lens on the previous generation Sony cameras with Alpha mount. mount. Like even here, I use it on a Sony with E-mount, and the lens optical stable seemed to work okay. This lens features a so-called full-time focusing ring, which means we don't need to switch to manual focus mode if we want to refocus the lens by turning the focus ring. It comes in handy if we need to focus on a bird or on a plane for that matter, which are far away and the lens starts hunting for something in a very close proximity. Some more advanced lenses usually have a switch to stop lenses from doing that, and while this Tamron doesn't have that mode, it is very easy to refocus it if we need to. The focus throw is about 120 degrees, which is fine for manual focusing, and focusing ring action is nice and smooth, which is quite commendable taking into account that this is a 14-year-old lens. Focus breathing is also quite well controlled here, which is definitely a plus if you plan to use this lens for video work. Okay, so let's jump into the testing. I will demonstrate the stills at different parameters first, and then I will include the video footage too. So with optical stable, it does make a difference. Mounted to my full-frame Sony, it does compete with in-camera IBS, and I must admit that at least to my subjective perception, this almost 15-year-old $200 lens optical stable outperforms my $2,500 fairly new Sony A7IV. So I prefer to use this lens stable. It is effective when shooting stills and when capturing the video. There is a slight hum from the lens when the stable is on, but it is not too intrusive. Also, the video stabilization, while being okay, does sometimes produce unwanted effects, especially if we start panning, which is the reason why more sophisticated telephoto lenses have a lock for vertical and horizontal stabilization only. Now, in terms of sharpness on different zoom positions, this lens is actually fairly sharp, especially in the middle. With Sony Animal Eye Detect autofocus, I managed to produce fairly crisp wildlife photographs as well as portraits, even shooting with a fully open aperture. However, if I'm not concerned with the bokeh or background subject separation and I need to squeeze maximum sharpness, then stopping down to f8 or even f11 will produce maximum sharpness on all zoom focal lengths, as you can see in the samples. Now, most of my video samples are done using cropped settings, which is an equivalent of APS-C sensor. A cropped sensor setting gives maximum reach for this lens, a maximum zoom equivalent of 450mm lens, which is quite decent for wildlife videography. I also use only manual focus, it is okay, and now I have enough manual focus experience with this lens to get good enough footage for social media and YouTube. The KNF concept adapter that I use doesn't support video autofocus, not for this lens anyway. However, there is apparently a more recent adapter from TT Artisan that will do good enough job for video focusing, so it might be my next upgrade. In regards to bokeh, well, sometimes I love it and sometimes it can be a bit strange, not too distracting, and it can be very pleasing, especially at long zoom ranges. Bokeh tends to be quite subjective, so I'll let you decide if you like it or not. So here you have it. If you found this review useful, do hit that like button. Of course, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so by hitting that red button over there. Thank you for watching, take care, and I will see you in the next video.